The massive alien vessel emerged from hyperspace above Earth on a cold morning in March of the year 2247. And within minutes, every government on the planet received the same transmission demanding an immediate audience with humanity's leader's ambassador. Thalvex of the Keth species stood at the center of his ship's command bridge, his insectoid eyes scanning the blue and green world below with something close to boredom. For he had done this same thing hundreds of times before on hundreds of other primitive worlds. The Volcari Dominion had ruled the Orion spur of the galaxy for 60,000 years. And in all that time, no species had ever successfully refused their terms of integration. So Thalvex expected this mission to be simple and quick. He watched his tactical display and noted the small human ships that were scrambling to form a defensive perimeter around their planet. And he found their efforts almost amusing in their futility. Primitive chemical propulsion systems. His science officer reported with a clicking sound that indicated mild disgust. No energy shields detected. Basic projectile weapons. And their largest vessel is barely 1/10 the size of our smallest cruiser. Thalvex made a gesture of acknowledgement with his upper limbs and turned to face the communication screen where the human delegation would soon appear. The United Earth Coalition had hastily assembled their representatives in a conference room in Geneva, and Admiral Elena Vasquez sat at the head of the table alongside diplomats, scientists, and political leaders from every major nation when Thalvex's image appeared on their screens. Many of the humans struggled to hide their shock at his appearance, for the Keth ambassador stood over 3 meters tall with a body covered in dark chitinous plates and 4 arms that ended in sharp manipulating appendages. "I am Ambassador Thalvex of the Volcari Dominion," he announced in a voice that the translation software rendered flat and emotionless. "I speak with the authority of the High Council that governs 12 spacefaring species across 10,000 star systems." The humans exchanged glances, and it was Admiral Vasquez who responded first. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador," she said in a calm and measured tone. "We are honored to make first contact with your civilization and hope this is the beginning of a peaceful relationship between our peoples." Thalvex made a sound that might have been laughter. "There has been a misunderstanding," he replied. "This is not a negotiation between equals. For the Dominion does not negotiate with Category 7 civilizations such as yours." "Category 7? One of the human diplomats asked with confusion evident in his voice. "The lowest classification in our system," Thalvex explained with what seemed like patience reserved for explaining things to children. "Your species has existed for barely 300,000 years. You have only had spaceflight capability for 3 centuries. You possess no psionic abilities whatsoever, and your biological forms are fragile and short-lived." He paused to let this information sink in before continuing. "The Dominion has encountered thousands of species like yours, and every single one of them has accepted our terms and been absorbed into our great civilization where they serve important functions as workers and resource providers." Admiral Vasquez leaned forward slightly, and her expression remained neutral even as her eyes grew harder. "And what exactly are these terms you mention, Ambassador?" Thalvex transmitted a data package to the human systems, and the representatives watched as the translation software converted the alien text into something they could understand. "Earth will provide a yearly tribute of minerals, metals, and biological resources, as specified in the attached documentation," Thalvex summarized. "Additionally, 10% of your population will be selected each decade to serve as labor conscripts in Dominion facilities across the sector." The room erupted in angry voices. But Admiral Vasquez raised her hand and silence fell. "And if we refuse these terms," she asked quietly, "then the Dominion will initiate what we call corrective integration." Thalvex answered without any change in his tone. A military fleet will be dispatched to neutralize your defensive capabilities. Your governments will be dissolved, and direct administration will be imposed until your species learns proper obedience. He tilted his head in a gesture that might have indicated curiosity. I should mention that corrective integration has only been necessary in approximately 15% of first contact situations. For most species, recognize the futility of resistance when they see the overwhelming power of the Dominion. The human representatives looked at each other with expressions ranging from fear to anger to disbelief, and several of them seemed ready to capitulate on the spot. But Admiral Vasquez stood up from her chair and walked closer to the screen where Thalvex's image loomed. Ambassador, I appreciate you taking the time to explain your terms so clearly, she said in a voice that carried no trace of fear. But I'm afraid the United Earth Coalition must respectfully decline your offer. For the first time since the conversation began, Thalvex showed something like genuine emotion as his mandibles clicked rapidly in what the translation software identified as surprise. You decline, he repeated as if uncertain he had heard correctly. Admiral, I do not think you understand the situation you are in. I understand it perfectly, Vasquez replied. You want our resources and our people as slaves, and you expect us to simply agree because your ships are bigger than ours. That is an accurate summary. Yes, then let me be equally clear with you. Ambassador, Vasquez said, as she met his insectoid gaze without flinching. Humanity has spent its entire history fighting against those who would conquer and enslave us. And we did not survive thousands of years of war against each other just to bow down to the first aliens who show up and make demands. Thalvex stared at her for a long moment, and then he made that strange laughing sound again. Your bravery is admirable, if foolish, he said. But bravery does not stop plasma weapons or shield your cities from orbital bombardment. Perhaps not, Vasquez agreed. But you might be surprised at what we can do when we are motivated. The ambassador shook his head slowly. I have heard such words before from other young species, and they all learned the same painful lesson in the end, he said. The Dominion has conquered 1,000 worlds, and not a single one has ever successfully resisted our might. There is always a first time for everything. Ambassador, Thalvex regarded her with what might have been pity. Very well. Admiral, I will report your response to the High Council, he said. You will be given 6 standard months to reconsider your position, and I strongly advise you to use that time wisely. He leaned closer to the camera, because when the disciplinary fleet arrives, there will be no more chances for negotiation, only consequences. The transmission ended, and the room fell silent as the human leaders tried to process what had just happened. One of the diplomats turned to Admiral Vasquez with fear written clearly on his face. What have you done? He demanded. You just declared war on an empire that controls 10,000 star systems, and we can barely defend our own solar system. Vasquez turned to face the assembled representatives, and a small smile appeared on her face. I did exactly what I was supposed to do, she said calmly. I bought us time. Time for what? Another official asked desperately. Time to build weapons we don't have. Time to develop technology that would take us centuries to create. The Admiral walked to the window and looked up at the sky where somewhere far above them the alien ship was. Preparing to leave, humanity learned something a long time ago, she said quietly. We learned that the universe is dangerous, and that someday something would come to threaten our existence. She turned back to face them. Did you really think we weren't preparing for this moment? In the year 2089, a small research station on the far side of the moon had detected something that would change the course of human history forever. And that discovery had been kept secret from the general public for over 150 years. The object was a probe, clearly artificial in origin, and its design was unlike anything humans had ever created. with strange alloys and technology that Earth's best scientists could barely understand even after decades of study. The probe was dead and had been drifting through space for perhaps millions of years. But its very existence proved one undeniable truth that humanity's leaders had long feared. And that truth was simple. We are not alone in the universe within a year of the discovery. The major governments of Earth had come together in unprecedented cooperation, setting aside their differences and rivalries to address this new reality. They created a secret organization called the Solar Defense Initiative, and its mission was straightforward: prepare humanity for the day when we would encounter living aliens, and ensure that we would be ready to defend ourselves if those aliens proved hostile. Admiral Elena Vasquez had been recruited into the initiative at the age of 25, and she had spent the next 30 years of her life working in the shadows to build something that the galaxy had never seen. Before, deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, hidden among countless rocks and debris, humanity had constructed its true fleet. The Armada Absolute. The public knew about Earth's official space navy, a collection of perhaps 50 patrol vessels and defensive platforms that were designed to protect against small threats like asteroids or the occasional space pirate. But the Armada Absolute was something else entirely, something that had consumed the secret resources of the entire planet for over a century. 1,700 warships waited in the darkness, each one representing decades of research and development, each one carrying weapons that the rest of the galaxy could not even imagine. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Unconquered Sun, and she watched as the final preparations were made for the battle that everyone had always known would come. The ship around her was massive, nearly 2 kilometers long, and its hull was covered in armor plating made from materials that human scientists had reverse engineered from that ancient alien probe. Status report, she commanded, and her voice echoed through the bridge where dozens of officers worked at their stations. All 1,700 vessels are reporting combat ready, her executive officer responded. Project Prometheus weapons are fully charged, Project Ragnarok missiles are armed, and Project Final Dawn is on standby, awaiting your authorization. Vasquez nodded slowly as she absorbed this information. Project Prometheus was humanity's answer to the energy weapons that aliens seemed to favor. Massive particle beam cannons that could tear through conventional shields like they were made of paper. Project Ragnarok consisted of antimatter warheads, each one capable of destroying a small moon, and each one carried by missiles that could reach nearly the speed of light. And Project Final Dawn was something that Vasquez hoped she would never have to use. A weapon so terrible that even its creators had argued about whether it should exist at all. The Dominion fleet will arrive in approximately 72 hours, her tactical officer announced. Long-range sensors indicate 300 vessels of various classes. 300, her executive officer said with a slight smile. They must think that's overwhelming force against a Category 7 civilization. They have no idea what they're walking into, Vasquez replied. And we're going to keep it that way until the last possible moment. She turned to address her command staff, the men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment for generations. Humanity has watched the skies and wondered what was out there, she said. We wondered if we would find friends among the stars or enemies. And now we have our answer. She gestured toward the tactical display that showed the approaching Dominion fleet. These aliens have conquered 1,000 worlds, and they expect us to be like all the others, weak and frightened and willing to submit rather than fight. Her eyes swept across the faces of her officers. But they made a mistake when they came to Earth, because they didn't do their research. They didn't look at our history, and they didn't understand what kind of species we really are. She pulled up a series of images on the main display. Images from human history that every person in the room recognized instantly. We are the species that fought 2 world wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own kind. She continued. We are the species that developed nuclear weapons and somehow managed not to destroy ourselves with them. More images appeared, showing the great battles and conflicts that had shaped human civilization. We have been fighting and killing each other for 10,000 years, perfecting the art of war in ways that no other species in this galaxy has ever experienced. She let those words hang in the air for a moment. The Dominion thinks they understand warfare because they have conquered weaker civilizations, but they have never faced an enemy like us. An enemy that has spent its entire existence in a state of constant competition and conflict. Her executive officer stepped forward. Admiral, we've received confirmation from all sector commanders, he reported. The fleets hidden in the moons of Jupiter and Saturn are ready. The forces concealed in the Kuiper Belt are in position, and the reserve armada in the Oort cloud is standing by. Vasquez nodded with satisfaction. For 150 years, humanity has been preparing for this moment, she said. We have built our ships in secret, developed our weapons in hidden facilities, and trained our soldiers for a war that most people on Earth don't even know is coming. She walked to the main viewport and looked out at the stars. The Dominion ambassador laughed at us. He called us primitive and weak, and he gave us 6 months to surrender. She turned back to face her crew. In 72 hours, we are going to teach him and every other alien in this galaxy a lesson they will never forget. The officers on the bridge stood straighter, their faces showing determination and pride. We did not spend a century building the greatest military force in human history just to watch it sit idle, Vasquez declared. We built it for this exact moment. For the day when someone would come to our world and try to take what is ours. She raised her hand in a signal that her communications officer recognized immediately. Open a channel to all ships. In the Armada Absolute, channel open. Admiral, Vasquez took a deep breath and then spoke words that would be remembered for as long as humanity existed. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez to all ships and all personnel, she announced. For generations we have waited in the shadows, preparing for a threat that many hoped would never come. But it has come, and now the moment is upon us. In 3 days, an alien fleet will arrive in our solar system, expecting to find a helpless and frightened species ready to bow before their might. But what they will find instead is us. They will find the Armada Absolute. They will find 1,700 warships crewed by men and women who have trained their entire lives for this battle. And they will learn what every enemy of humanity has learned throughout our long and bloody history. She paused for emphasis. They will learn that we do not surrender, we do not submit, and we do not go quietly into the night. When the Dominion fleet arrives, we will show them the true face of humanity, and that face will be the last thing they ever see. All ships, prepare for battle. The galaxy is about to discover what happens when you underestimate the human race. Grand Admiral Vorath of the Sorak species stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Divine Judgment, and he watched with cold reptilian eyes as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. 300 warships of the Volcari Dominion spread out in perfect formation behind him, and every single one of them was eager to begin the conquest of this primitive world called Earth. Scan the system, Vorath commanded in his hissing voice. Show me what pathetic defenses these humans have prepared. His sensor officer ran the scans and then reported with what sounded like amusement, detecting approximately 50 small vessels near the third planet. Admiral, their technology signatures matched the Category 7 classification. Basic propulsion and primitive weapons. Vorath made a sound of contempt deep in his throat. This will be over within hours, he declared. Signal all ships to advance in standard conquest formation. and prepare the ground forces for immediate deployment once we have cleared their orbital defenses. The Dominion fleet began its slow advance into the Sol system, and Vorath was already composing his victory report in his mind. He had conquered dozens of worlds in his long career, and this one seemed like it would be the easiest of them all. A simple matter of overwhelming force against a helpless enemy. But as his fleet passed the orbit of Neptune, something strange began to happen. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out with sudden confusion in his voice. "I'm detecting new contacts." "How many?" Vorath asked without much concern. The sensor officer's scales paled visibly as he stared at his screen. "Admiral, I'm detecting hundreds of contacts." "No, wait. The number is still climbing." Vorath turned sharply to look at the tactical display, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Ships were appearing everywhere, emerging from behind moons, rising from within asteroid fields, decloaking from hidden positions throughout the outer solar system. "What is this?" Vorath demanded as he watched the contact count climb past 500. Then 800, then 1,000. "They were hidden," his tactical officer said with growing horror in his voice. "They were waiting for us." The final count settled at 1,700 human warships. And they were not the primitive vessels that the Dominion had expected. These ships were massive, bristling with weapons that Dominion sensors could not even properly identify. And they were moving to surround the Dominion fleet with terrifying precision on the bridge of the unconquered sun. Admiral Vasquez watched the enemy fleet with a Predator's patience. "All ships report ready," our executive officer confirmed. "The enemy is completely surrounded. Open a channel to the Dominion flagship," Vasquez commanded a moment later. The shocked face of Grand Admiral Vorath appeared on her screen. "I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Coalition," she said calmly. "You have entered our solar system with hostile intent, and I am giving you one chance to surrender your fleet and withdraw peacefully." Vorath's reptilian features twisted with rage. "You dare threaten me," he snarled. "The Dominion has conquered 1,000 worlds, and no primitive species has ever defeated us in battle." "There's a first time for everything, Admiral," Vasquez replied with a slight smile. "You may have more ships than we expected, but quantity means nothing against Dominion technology and training," Vorath declared. "All ships, attack formation. Destroy these impudent creatures." The Dominion fleet began to move into attack position, and Vasquez nodded to her weapons officer. "Fire Project Prometheus," she ordered, across the human fleet. 1,700 ships opened fire simultaneously with weapons that the Dominion had never seen before. Massive, particle beam cannons released concentrated streams of energy that moved at nearly the speed of light, and they struck the Dominion shields with devastating effect. The first wave of fire tore through the forward Dominion vessels like they were made of paper, and Vorath watched in disbelief as 6 of his ships exploded in the first 3 seconds of combat. "Impossible," he breathed. "Those weapons should not exist on a Category 7 world." But Vasquez was not finished. "Launch Project Ragnarok," she commanded, from the missile bays of the human fleet. Thousands of antimatter warheads streaked toward the enemy at 0.8 times the speed of light. Dominion point defense systems tried to intercept them, but the missiles were too fast and too numerous, and when they struck their targets, entire sections of the enemy fleet disappeared in blinding flashes of annihilation. "Admiral, we've lost 47 ships," Vorath's tactical officer screamed above the chaos. "Our shields are not stopping their weapons." Vorath tried to rally his forces, ordering them to concentrate fire on the largest human vessels. But every time the Dominion ships turned to face one threat, another human squadron would strike them from a different angle. Though humans fought with a coordination and ferocity that Vorath had never seen in any species, and their tactics seemed designed specifically to counter everything the Dominion tried to do. "They know our formations," Vorath realized with growing horror. They've studied how we fight. And he was right, because for 150 years, humanity had been analyzing that ancient alien probe, learning everything they could about Dominion technology and tactics, every weakness, every blind spot. Every pattern in Dominion battle doctrine had been identified and exploited. The battle raged for hour after hour. And with each passing minute, the Dominion fleet grew smaller while the human Armada pressed its advantageous, watched his command display with desperation as ship after ship was destroyed. And he finally made the decision that no Dominion admiral had ever made before. All ships, retreat, he ordered. Fall back to hyperspace coordinates. But when his fleet tried to escape, they found their path blocked by another human force. A second armada that had been hiding in the distant Ur cloud. No. Vorith whispered as he realized the trap had been complete from the beginning. This cannot be happening. Admiral Vasquez appeared on his screen once more. Grand Admiral, your fleet is surrounded and outgunned, she said. You can continue to fight and watch all of your ships be destroyed. Or you can surrender and save what remains of your forces. Vorith's pride screamed at him to fight to the death. But as he looked at the tactical display showing barely 50 surviving Dominion vessels, he knew that continuing would accomplish nothing. What are your terms? He asked through clenched teeth. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, Vasquez replied. Your crews will be treated as prisoners of war according to Earth conventions. And you personally will be held for eventual negotiations with the Dominion government. The Grand Admiral stared at her for a long moment. And then he gave the order that would echo throughout the galaxy. All ships, stand down, he said in a voice heavy with defeat. We surrender. As human marines in powered exoskeletons boarded the Divine Judgment and took Vorith into custody, he found himself face to face with Admiral Vasquez. How? He asked, unable to comprehend what had just happened. How did a Category 7 species defeat the Dominion? Vasquez looked at him with something that might have been pity. You classified us based on our technology and our age in the galaxy, she said. But you never looked at our history. She gestured to the Marines around her. Warriors who had trained for years for exactly this moment. Humanity has been at war with itself for 10,000 years. Admiral, she continued, we have perfected the art of killing in ways that your peaceful ancient civilizations could never imagine. You call yourselves conquerors, but you've only ever fought species that were too weak or too frightened to resist. We are neither weak nor frightened. And now your Dominion is going to learn what it means to face an enemy that knows how to fight. She turned and walked away, leaving Vorith to contemplate the impossible truth a Category 7 civilization had just destroyed the most powerful fleet the Dominion had ever sent against a single world, and somewhere in the depths of space, the High Council of the Valkyrie Dominion was about to receive a message that would change everything. It was a simple image of the shattered Dominion fleet, accompanied by 6 words in every language the humans had been able to translate. We decline your terms. Send more. The news of the defeated soul spread through the Valkyrie Dominion faster than any message had ever traveled before. And within days, every species in the coalition was talking about the impossible thing that had happened. For 40,000 years, the Dominion had been undefeated in battle. And in all that time, no tributary species had ever successfully resisted their might. But now a small blue world on the edge of the galaxy had done exactly that. The High Council convened an emergency session on the throne world of Velka Prime, and the representatives of all 12 ruling species gathered to debate what should be done. We must respond with overwhelming force, declared High Commander Zethrak of the Sorax, his scales flushing dark with anger. Send every ship we have and burn that human world to ashes. And how many ships would that require? Asked Ambassador Thalvex of the Keth, the same diplomat who had first made contact with humanity. We sent 300 vessels against them, and lost 284. So how many would we need to guarantee victory? 5,000, Zethrak replied immediately. 10,000 if necessary. The humans cannot possibly match such numbers. Thalvex made a gesture of disagreement. And while our combined fleets are attacking one solar system, what happens to the rest of our territory? He asked. The tributary species will see our weakness, and some of them may decide that the time has come to seek their own freedom. The council chamber fell silent as the representatives considered this terrifying possibility. The Dominion ruled over more than 800 tributary species, civilizations that had been conquered and subjugated over thousands of years. And those species vastly outnumbered the 12 ruling races if even a fraction of them decided to rebel at the same time. The consequences would be catastrophic. Perhaps we should consider negotiation, suggested the diplomatic liaison from the Mervani, an aquatic species known for their caution. The humans asked only to be left alone, and perhaps we should grant that request. Never, Zethrak roared. If we show weakness now, every species in the galaxy will lose respect for us. The Dominion does not negotiate with inferiors. While the High Council argued about how to respond, humanity was not sitting idle. Admiral Vasquez had convinced Earth's leaders that defense was not enough. That if they simply waited for the next Dominion attack, they would eventually be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Instead, she proposed something far more ambitious: liberation using captured Dominion star charts and navigational data. The Armada Absolute began a campaign that would reshape the galaxy. The first target was a world called Kethvar, a planet that had been under Dominion control for 3,000 years. And when the human fleet arrived in orbit, the oppressed population did not know what to expect. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Coalition, she broadcast to the surface. We are here to offer you a choice. The Dominion told you that resistance is futile, that no species can stand against their might. But we have proven that to be a lie. We are not here to conquer you or to replace one master with another. We are here to offer you freedom. Join us, fight alongside us, and together we will break the chains that have held your people for millennia. The response from Kethvar was overwhelming. And within days, millions of volunteers were signing up to join the growing coalition. From Kethvar, the fleet moved to Therax Prime, then to the Nelvani cluster, then to a dozen other systems where tributary species had suffered under Dominion rule for generations, and everywhere they went, the humans found allies eager to fight back against their oppressors. Species that had never held weapons before learned to use them under human instruction. And shipyards that had built vessels for the Dominion were converted to produce warships for the Coalition within 6 months. Admiral Vasquez commanded not just the original human armada, but a combined fleet of over 4,000 vessels crewed by beings from 32 different species. She stood on the bridge of the unconquered sun and looked at the tactical display showing her combined forces. Admiral, her executive officer said as he approached with a datapad, "We've received another 100 requests from tributary worlds, asking for liberation." Vasquez nodded slowly. "And what is the Dominion doing in response?" she asked. "Their fleets are scattered across the galaxy trying to put out fires," he replied. "They can't concentrate their forces because every time they mass ships in one area, we strike somewhere else. The classic guerrilla strategy," Vasquez said with satisfaction. "Hit them where they're weak, avoid their strength, and never give them a target they can destroy. Speaking of which, our intelligence suggests they're assembling a major fleet at the Varthan shipyards," her tactical officer reported. "If we let them complete their preparations, they could field over 2,000 ships." Vasquez studied the star charts for a long moment. "Then we don't let them complete their preparations," she decided. Send word to the Keth volunteers and the Thraxian fleet. We're going to hit those shipyards before they know what's happening. The Battle of Verthan would become legendary in the annals of galactic history, not just for its military significance, but for what it represented for the first time ever. Species that had been conquered by the Dominion fought side by side against their former masters. And the sight of Keth warriors flying alongside human pilots shattered the myth of Dominion invincibility once and for all. The shipyards were destroyed along with the partially constructed fleet. And the ripple effects spread throughout Dominion space. More tributary species began to rebel. Some joining the coalition openly, and others simply refusing to send tributes or provide laborers. The economic foundation of the Dominion began to crack under the strain. And the High Council's debates grew more desperate with each passing week. We are losing control. Ambassador Thalvax warned his fellow council members. The humans have done something that no species has ever accomplished. They have given hope to the oppressed. Then we crush that hope, Zethrak insisted. We find the human homeworld and we destroy it completely. Without their leadership, the coalition will collapse. Will it? Talvex asked quietly. Or will their martyrdom inspire even greater resistance? He pulled up images from across Dominion space. Images of rebellion and resistance and defiance. The humans have changed everything, he said. They have shown the galaxy that the Dominion can be defeated. And that knowledge cannot be unlearned. Back aboard the unconquered sun, Admiral Vasquez received reports from across the galaxy and allowed herself a small moment of hope. We're winning, her executive officer observed. The Dominion is fracturing. We're not winning yet, Vasquez corrected him. We're surviving and we're growing stronger. But the Dominion still has massive resources and millions of soldiers. She looked out at the stars that had once seemed so empty and hostile. But we've proven something important today, she continued. We've proven that one species with courage and determination can change the course of history. Now we just have to finish what we started. 1 year had passed since the day Ambassador Thalvax had arrived at Earth with his demands for surrender. And in that time, the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The Valkyrie Dominion, which had ruled for 60,000 years and conquered 1,000 worlds, was crumbling from within as more and more tributary species joined the growing coalition. And now Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the unconquered sun as her fleet approached the one target that would end the war forever. Velkar Prime, the throne world of the Dominion itself. All ships report ready. Admiral, her executive officer announced. 4,200 vessels from 47 different species. Vasquez looked at the tactical display and marveled at what humanity had accomplished. The fleet around her included not just human warships but vessels from every corner of the galaxy, crewed by beings who had once been slaves and were now warriors fighting for their freedom. Keth cruisers flew alongside Thraxian destroyers. Mervani carriers coordinated with Nelvani frigates. And at the center of it all, the original human armada remained the heart and soul of the coalition. Open a channel to the surface. Vasquez commanded. The face of High Commander Zethrak appeared on her screen. And for the first time since the war began, she saw fear in his reptilian eyes. You cannot do this, he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. Valkar Prime is sacred ground, the birthplace of our civilization. You would be committing an atrocity. I am not here to destroy your world, Vasquez replied calmly. I am here to end a war that your Dominion started when you came to Earth with demands for our submission. She leaned forward slightly. You have a choice. High Commander, the same choice you once gave us. Surrender peacefully, and we will spare your people. Or resist and face the consequences. The Dominion does not surrender, Zethrak snarled. But his words lacked conviction. Then the Dominion will fall, Vasquez said simply. And it will fall not because we hate you, but because you built your civilization on a foundation of conquest and slavery that could not last forever. Behind her, the massive coalition fleet spread out in battle formation, their weapons charged and ready. Look at the beings who stand against you today, Vasquez continued. Cathan, Thraxian, and Mervani, and 100 other species who were once your slaves. They did not come here because we forced them. They came because you gave them a reason to fight. You created the army that is now at your doorstep. Every world you conquered, every species you oppressed, every act of cruelty you committed over 60,000 years has come back to haunt you today. Zethrak stared at the tactical display showing the overwhelming coalition force, and his resistance finally broke. What are your terms? He asked in a voice that sounded impossibly old. I want to speak with the entire High Council, Vasquez replied. In person on the surface of Velcar Prime, 3 hours later, Admiral Vasquez walked into the Great Council chamber where the Dominion had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Around her stood representatives of the coalition, warriors and diplomats from dozens of species who had earned their place through sacrifice and courage. The 12 members of the High Council sat in their ancient seats, looking diminished and defeated in ways that went beyond mere military loss. Vasquez approached the central podium and looked at each of them in turn before she spoke. The war is over, she announced. The Velcari Dominion, as it has existed for 60,000 years, is finished. A murmur of shock and fear ran through the council members. But, Vasquez continued, raising her hand for silence, that does not mean your species must be destroyed or enslaved. This statement caused genuine confusion among the Dominion representatives, who had expected the victors to inflict upon them the same treatment they had inflicted on others. I don't understand, Ambassador Thalvex said. Speaking for the first time, you have won. You have the power to do whatever you wish, so why would you show mercy? Vasquez walked to the great window that overlooked the capital city of Velcar Prime. Because we are not like you, she said quietly. We know what it means to be conquered, to be oppressed, to have our freedom taken away. And we swore that we would never become the thing we fought against. She turned back to face the council. Humanity did not come to the stars seeking an empire, she continued. We came seeking friends and allies, and when you threatened us, we defended ourselves. But defense was never our true goal. Our true goal has always been something much harder than conquest. We want to build a galaxy where no species has to fear being enslaved by another, where every civilization can develop according to its own values and choices. That is what we fought for. And that is what we are offering you today. She pulled up a holographic display, showing a document that human diplomats had spent months preparing. This is the Galactic Compact, Vasquez explained. A voluntary alliance of equal species based on mutual defense and free trade. There are no masters and no slaves, no tributes and no conscripts. Every member species retains full sovereignty over their own worlds, and decisions affecting the alliance as a whole are made by consensus, not by force. The council members studied the document in stunned silence. You would let us join this compact? Zethrak asked incredulously. After everything we have done? If you choose to, Vasquez replied. The compact is open to any species that agrees to its principles, including the 12 species of the former Dominion. But why? Thalvex pressed. We tried to enslave your people. We have caused suffering across the galaxy for thousands of years. How can you simply forgive that? Vasquez was quiet for a long moment before she answered. Humanity has a very long and very bloody history, she said. We have committed terrible acts against each other. We have fought wars that killed hundreds of millions of our own kind. And we have learned something important from all that suffering. We learned that vengeance creates nothing but more vengeance, that empires built on conquest always fall, and that the only victories that truly last are the ones where former enemies become friends. She looked at each council member in turn. "You underestimated us because we were young," she said. "You thought that because we had only been in space for 300 years, we must be primitive and weak. But in those 300 years, we learned more about war and peace than you learned in 60,000 years of empire. We learned that the strongest civilization is not the one that conquers others, but the one that makes others want to stand." Beside it, Ambassador Thalvex rose from his seat and approached the human admiral. "In all my centuries of life, I have never met a species like yours," he said. "You have defeated us utterly and completely. And yet you offer us partnership instead of punishment. That is not weakness," he continued. "That is a kind of strength I never imagined could exist." He extended his upper, manipulating limbs in a gesture that the translation software identified as respect. "The Keth accept your terms," he declared. "We will join the Galactic Compact, one by one." The other council members rose and made the same declaration, until all 12 species of the former Dominion had agreed to join the new alliance. As Vasquez left the council chamber, she found her executive officer waiting for her. "You could have demanded anything," he said. "Reparations, territory, control over their military. Why did you settle for so little?" Vasquez smiled and shook her head. "I didn't settle for little," she replied. "I achieved everything we ever really wanted." She looked up at the alien sky with its unfamiliar stars. "The galaxy thought we were weak because we were young," she said. "They thought we were primitive because we hadn't conquered any other worlds. But we never wanted to conquer anyone. We just wanted to be left alone to live our lives in peace. And when they wouldn't let us do that, we defended ourselves. Now we have something better than an empire," she continued. "We have allies who chose to stand with us. Friends who respect us not because they fear our weapons, but because they admire what we stand for. That is a victory worth more than 1,000 conquered worlds." In the years that followed, the Galactic Compact grew to include hundreds of species, and the era of conquest and empire faded into history. The 12 former Dominion species became some of the most enthusiastic members of the Alliance. And Ambassador Thalvex himself often told the story of how he had once dismissed humanity as a category. 7 civilization. "I have lived for over 300 years, he would say. "And in all that time, I have learned only one truly important lesson. Never underestimate the humans, because they will always find a way to surprise you." And somewhere in the great archives of Earth, the ancient alien probe that had started, it all sat in a place of honor. A reminder of the day humanity had learned it was not alone. They had feared that discovery at first, but in the end it had led them to something wonderful, had led them to the stars and to a galaxy full of friends they had never expected to find.